Start that now. But we should get started in just a couple minutes. All right, we should have some folks still coming in, but Mark, did you want to get things started?
Sure, yeah, let's do that since we're a little bit past 8 o'clock. And Dylan, thank you for the initial sort of housekeeping points that I think oftentimes we take for granted, but I think it is important as all of us do quote unquote engagements, roundtables, discussions, in a virtual format. So just with that, let me first wish a good morning to those our friends and colleagues in Asia, and then good evening to those like myself who are joining from the United States. I'm Mark Mealy, the Council's Senior Vice President for Policy. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this timely workshop on challenges and opportunities with regard to ASEAN's circular economy. The US-ASEAN Business Council, is the American business community's premier trade association promoting commercial relations between the United States and ASEAN. And I'm really glad to note that over the past year, I would probably say our fastest growing sort of area of focus at the council, really at the direction of our members, are related to the broader questions around sustainability. And it's not surprising that earlier this year, at the convening of the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting, which the US-ABC actually had the honor of actually attending, we really noted that the ministers agreed to sort of the adoption of the framework for the circular economy for the ASEAN economic community, which in a sense, for those of us who know ASEAN, not surprising that this area warranted the attention of key government officials from all 10 countries. We know oftentimes there's a desire to build a regional framework that is inclusive to all 10 countries. And then from that framework, we then oftentimes see efforts oftentimes in the form of roadmaps or work plans that again have the buy-in of all 10 countries, but also more importantly, key stakeholders, including the private sector, to try to really move an agenda forward. With regard to the ASEAN Circular Economy for framework, its long-term goals are to promote a more resilient economy in ASEAN, resource efficiency, sustainability, and inclusive growth. And I think it's timely because obviously as ASEAN, a group of 10 nations in Asia are sort of moving in the direction, we also know, of course, at the global level, we also have similar sort of initiatives. We know that at the United Nations Environmental Assembly, there's also been a great deal of deliberations on possible solutions to address issues around circular economy and waste, again, at the global level. So we're really excited to kind of bring some of these dimensions, again, at the global level, as well as at the ASEAN regional level together. Our first two speakers will discuss the current state of these negotiations, again, at the global level, as well as offer some perspectives on a solution-oriented way forward to address the serious crisis of plastic pollution globally. And of course, for those of us who follow this particular issue, we know that ASEAN really is at the heart of this kind of global discourse around ocean plastics. We think it's important to obviously kind of have a bit of a level setting and to understand sort of some of the how the international community kind of got to where we are today on this global issue. We have two speakers with us tonight. Let me just introduce them first briefly. Our first speaker is Mr. Keiji Nakashima. Mr. Nakashima is the director of the Office of Policies Against Marine Plastic Pollution, Environmental Management Bureau at Japan's Ministry of the Environment. As a nature conservation and community development specialist, Mr. Nakashima has worked towards the management of the world's natural heritage sites, national parks with local stakeholders in Japan and Indonesia. And of course, we'll circle back to that connection with Indonesia, including the environmental impact assessments, marine conservation efforts, promoting environmental sustainability, and preserving biodiversity. He's also been involved in the development and implementation of policies and programs related to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, as well as the International Coral Reef Initiative. Since April of 2020, Mr. Nakashima has focused on combating marine plastic litter in his role at the Ministry of Environment, where he's worked since 1996. Just to know, again, I'll introduce our second speaker and then we'll turn the floor over. Our second speaker tonight will be Mr. Stuart Harris, who's the Senior Director of Global Plastics Policy at the American Chemistry Council's Plastic Division. Stuart is responsible for developing and implementing ACC's global policy to create a more circular economy for plastics to eliminate plastic waste. He's also the chair of the Plastic Industry's Global Action Team, which implements the declaration of the Global Plastic Associations for Solutions on Marine Litter. As part of the Global Declaration, 80 signatories from 43 countries have implemented over 395 projects addressing marine litter since 2011. And I would dare so say a good number of these projects have obviously involved working with partners and stakeholders in Southeast Asia. Stuart engages in international advocacy and global diplomacy on behalf of the World Plastics Council and the International Council of Chemical Associations. We're really excited to have both of these speakers here, and we're going to give each one of them roughly 7, 8, 10 minutes or so to make some presentations to us, and then we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A with these two speakers. So with that, Keiji-san, with that introduction, I'd like to turn the microphone over to you and allow you to deliver some remarks on Japan's efforts to combat marine litter and some background from your perspective on the current state of negotiations on a global plastics treaty ahead of the next United Nations Environment Assembly meetings, which will be held in February of 2022. So with that, Keiji-san, the floor is yours, and we look forward to your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. My name is Nakashima Keiji. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Today, I'd like to present Japan's efforts and toward the UN Environment Assembly, UNEA 5.2, which is held in next February in Nairobi, Kenya. Especially talk about the situation of the discussion on the establishment of the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee, Inc., on marine plastic pollution, which will be the main topic of the UNEA 5.2. Next, please. Thank you. The most epoch-making initiative of Japan in recent years is the G20 Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, which was shared as a common vision by the leaders of each country at the G20 summit held in Osaka in 2019. The Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, which aims to reduce additional pollution by marine plastic litter to zero by 2050. This vision has since been widely shared by 87 countries and regions. The summit also approved the G20 implementation framework for mutual learning as a framework to achieve this vision. Next, please. In order to achieve this vision, domestically, Japan has formulated a strategy and action plan to promote measures at all stages of plastic production, from upstream to downstream, and is moving forward with these measures. Next, please. In particular, in June, the Plastic Resource Circulation Act was passed based on the resource circulation strategy for plastics. This is the first law in Japan that focuses on the recycling of a single material. It is expected that this law will greatly advance the resource circulation of plastics in Japan. Next, please. Internationally, in order to support the effort and innovations of governments and the private sector, the following activities have been carried out. For example, forum, a G20 report on action against marine plastic litter, and the holding of multi-stakeholder platform forum, preparation guidelines for harmonization of microplastic monitoring methods, establishment of a microplastic database, and establish a knowledge center in Indonesia, which is a private sector network center to promote marine plastic measures in the ASEAN region. Also, we have a lot of the support on waste management through JICA or some ODS, ODS schemes. Next, please. G20 report on actions against marine plastic litter is a very effective tool to monitor the progress of the efforts of each country and the international organization. You can see that each government or organization is making efforts in accordance with the current circumstances of the region and the characteristics of the organization. If you are interested, please refer to the URL on the slide. Next, please. Yes. Here is a simple diagram showing the changes in the 3 years since this report. Over the past 3 years, the number of reporting countries and the number of countries that have developed national action plan and the legal frameworks have each increased. Because of the change in the number of reporting countries, these results do not directly indicate progress in addressing marine plastics. However, I think it is safe to say that many countries are making rapid progress in tackling marine plastic pollution. Next, please. So last but not least, I would like to introduce an upcoming discussion. In preparation for UNEA 5.2 in February, there is a discussion on the establishment of Inc. for a new international instrument on marine plastic pollution. Japan supports the establishment of the Inc. on this issue. Last week, Japan submitted a draft resolution to UNEP for the establishment of the Inc. And Peru and Rwanda had already submitted a draft resolution on the establishment of the Inc., which means that there are two draft resolutions with different approaches to the establishment of the Inc. The Peru-Rwanda proposal seems to suggest that the Inc. discussion be prejudged in detail and that upstream measures, especially regulation, be taken. This may make it difficult for some countries to participate to the Inc. Next. Japan believes that it is extremely important that as many countries as possible participate in the Inc. Therefore, in the new international instrument, we think it is important to support the effort of each country by sharing their good practices and under a common international objective. Also, we think that taking a comprehensive life cycle approach that promotes the balance from the design stage to waste management and from upstream to downstream, and that each country takes into account in its own circumstances rather than a one-size-fits-all approach will ultimately lead to effective reductions. This time, two draft resolutions were submitted with different approaches on the establishment of the Inc. It is understood that this has opened the door for countries that are not in favor of the establishment of the Inc. and has widened the option for countries that have not yet clarified their positions. We will continue to discuss with many countries What kind of resolution would be appropriate, giving top priority to a resolution to establish the INC in which many countries can participate? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much for those comments. I think that again, that gives us a good, so again, sort of bit of a level setting for sort of some of the qualitative nature of sort of the international conversation that is going on today with regard to this topic. And as you noted, there's obviously in any kind of multilateral setting, there are different perspectives and different points of view, which we totally understand in terms of the international community in that regard. So I think you've given us, again, a good place to get started here today. Let me now turn to Stuart to give you an opportunity to, again, from your perspective, to share, again, some of the initial international points of view on kind of where we are today in terms of this international discourse. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'd like to build on Keiji-san's remarks a bit at the end there regarding the leadership that the government of Japan has shown in introducing a UNIA resolution. We have, as was mentioned, resolutions from both Rwanda and Peru and the government of Japan, but a little bit on kind of how we got to where we are today. Back in 2017, at the third meeting of UNIA, there was starting to be a push from the government of Norway and others that some kind of global structure was needed to address the marine litter issue. Member states were not able to reach consensus on that, and instead created an expert group to do some further work and investigation into sources and possible solutions to address the marine litter and microplastic issue. The work of that expert group was continued at UNIA 4 and concluded this past year with a report and information that will be provided to UNIA 5 to help inform the decision of member states as they move forward. UNIA 5, because of the COVID situation, was broken into part 1, which happened earlier this year, really looking at the budget and some other structural matters. And then part 2, which, as Keiji-san mentioned, will happen in February of next year. And that's where we expect the adoption of resolutions, potentially one establishing an intergovernmental negotiating committee to develop a new global agreement. But in between that time, between UNIA 5 part 1 and the part 2 that'll happen in February, we've seen a lot of activity in this space. 2 different groups of friends, one based in New York, one based in Nairobi, were both formed really with the idea of trying to build support for the need for a global agreement. And then this past September, there was a ministerial conference that was held in Geneva and hosted by the governments of Germany, Ecuador, Vietnam, and Ghana. And that conference really, again, trying to build support for the global agreement, but not only for a global agreement, but for more of a regulatory top-down approach to a global agreement for plastics. We do expect in February of next year that member states will reach agreement on a resolution to establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee, and that resolution will provide direction to that process, that negotiating process. So to Keiji-san's comments, and we very much agree on behalf of the global plastics industry, that the proposal by Rwanda and Peru really seeks to prejudge and steer that negotiation process by including a lot of detail that is not necessary, and there are decisions that can be made by that negotiating committee. The proposal by the government of Japan, in our opinion, really does leave it to the negotiators to determine the best path forward. And as we heard Keiji-san say, really brings a lot of those governments to the table that are not comfortable with the approach being proposed by Rwanda and Peru, and some of the approaches and comments that we're hearing from other member states. Next slide, please. So looking at the debate right now, it's less about whether or not we will see a resolution to kick off negotiation, and more about what is that future treaty going to look like, and how much direction does UNIA give to the negotiating committee in terms of what its mandate is. The two sides are really between a globally prescriptive kind of regulatory top-down approach and a more flexible approach. The prescriptive approach looks at things like production limits, potentially capping the supply of virgin and recycled plastic production for all uses, impacting the ability of countries to really expand their own domestic production. Product bans, limiting domestic authority without considering life cycle assessments, and potentially leading to harmful substitutions. So the globally prescriptive top-down regulatory approach is really seeking to create a structure where a small group would create a regulatory system for the entire world for plastics and chemical additives, really taking a lot of the decision-making away from governments. The more flexible approach, and one that we think is a more sustainable and more inclusive way to address the problem, is something that relies on things like design guidance. So voluntary standards that would help governments transition to a circular economy, support the foundation for a circular economy in terms of access to waste management infrastructure, encouraging innovation, and driving toward this idea of everyone having access to collections so that we can get material back for a circular economy. It would also include funding for waste management, infrastructure, and recycling, and recognition or deployment of emerging technologies around recycling. These things would all, this flexible approach is really geared toward achieving that goal, similar to the Osaka Blue Ocean vision of no new plastic leakage to the environment by 2050, or some similar goal that member states would agree to at UNEA. So with that, I think maybe I'll conclude my remarks and we can move to the discussion.
Great, Stuart. Thank you so much for those interventions. And it's timely because we do have some questions that are already kind of being shared with us in the chat. So let me just, we'll open the floor up and I'll kind of again pass on to both of you what we're sort of getting from our audience participants. So let me begin with Kadi-san. You brought up, for example, the G20's framework for actions on marine plastic litter. And obviously for those of us at the US-ASEAN Business Council, we're very excited. In fact, we've had a number of conversations already with cabinet ministers in the government of Indonesia regarding Indonesia, as you know, being host or being the chair of the G20 next year. And so I guess the first question might be, from your perspective, the government of Japan's perspective, do you anticipate that under Indonesia's sort of chairmanship year of G20, let's say potentially further actions in this space around marine plastic litter to be sort of woven into the agenda? And in a sense, we oftentimes ask ASEAN member state governments, when they are playing host to sort of regional or multilateral summits, how do they think they can really leverage playing the role as chair or host in really highlighting what types of efforts that Indonesia wants to do in terms of addressing this issue, and even potentially what ASEAN is trying to do to address the issue of sort of marine plastic debris in the region. So again, any thoughts you might have in terms of that intersection between G20 and Indonesia next year, and again the broader global discourse that we know is underway?
Oh, Mark, thank you, Mark. Thank you for your question. And now we're discussing with Indonesia for the next G20, and I'm not sure that just because the discussion was just launched, and but Indonesia is eager to make the report which I explained, the actions report, and maybe with Japan support to make a report too. And I think the situation which when held in the G20 summit, maybe I suppose INC is established after UNEA 5.2 anyway. And I wonder the main negotiation place, discussion place is should be ink.
Mhm.
And so in this context, the G20 cannot work so strong, so hard. Should not work strongly for the negotiation. So maybe negotiation should be held in ink. So and but maybe all G20 country can push our negotiation. This is my one perspective, and also it's the included in the Japan draft resolution. And during the negotiation of the future global instrument, maybe the plastic problem is going on. So we should work against marine plastic pollution during the discussion too. So maybe the Japan expect we continue work the real action for the against marine plastic, not only discussion. So this is my perspective. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. We got two other really good points here, and again, I kind of want to make sure both speakers can maybe offer their perspectives. So let me just put it on the table. Next question: how can really any type of sort of a global plastic treaty help ASEAN nations address the issue of plastic waste? And a related question, that just came in also. With regard to some of the international conversations that we know are ongoing, is 2050. So basically, we were talking about a little over 25 years. Is that really an appropriate deadline for really trying to sort of get to a point where, quote unquote, the issue has been resolved? Welcome any comments or questions or observations on both of those, sort of the intersection between a global treaty, if it emerges, how might countries in Southeast Asia leverage that? And of course, a global treaty in the context of is 2050 a reasonable or legitimate kind of time frame to really address this issue? Again, I open the floor to really comments or responses from both of our speakers.
Mark, if I could jump in,
Mhm.
the plastic industry's vision for a global treaty is one in which all governments would commit to eliminating leakage of plastic into the environment. And to the 2050 question, whether or not that's an appropriate date, I think is more of a question for governments. But along with that, looking at the flexible approach and looking at the approach that the government of Japan is outlining, we really see the opportunity for industry and governments to work together. The private sector of the plastics industry has been doing a lot of work through the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, through other efforts to really try to build out the infrastructure for a circular economy, but we can't do it by ourselves. And there are certain things that we really need governments to help with. And so the treaty is an opportunity to bring and really convene that government industry power to help build out the pieces of the supply chain that will allow us to realize a circular economy. And I think importantly for the ASEAN region, we know there's a tremendous cost associated with building that infrastructure, whether it's providing universal access to waste management, whether it's providing centers to reprocess used plastics into new recycled plastic, whether it's providing converters that can take the recycled plastic and turn that into products, really creating that more local circular economy. That's going to come with a cost. And there will be some funding available through a treaty, but I think more importantly, there's the opportunity to unlock investment from the private sector, multinational development banks, and others by removing these barriers to the circular economy. So I think that's one of the greatest opportunities in the ASEAN region, is that public-private partnership, removing barriers and attracting additional investment to create these local circular economies that will help us address the plastic waste issue, but also help build help contribute to economic development in the region.
Mm-hmm. Kade-san, did you have any thoughts you wanted to add to that?
I agree with Jonathan's comment, and also all ASEAN countries will make a effort to make action plans or any other the measures to combat marine plastic pollution, and also the progress, the action plans or measures according to the history or the circumstances. So I wonder the global trade instrument should respect their history or circumstances. Thank you.
Mhm. Great, thank you so much. We've got a couple of more minutes. Let me just put two other questions on the table. And again, welcome your comments and perspectives. One question was just from either of your, either government/industry point of view, could you point to, let's say, any models or examples of best practices that maybe that you guys see countries, in the international community really kind of moving forward in building out the necessary kind of ecosystem for a circular economy and ways of tackling sort of the marine plastic waste question? That's the first point. And then I would also, I think we might welcome any observations or comments on as we talk about potentially a global treaty, that's obviously again looking forward, but I'd just be curious, do either of you see examples of how countries like Japan or the United States and potentially even China, obviously, as major sources of development assistance are trying to use those tools to really maybe support countries that maybe are trying to, again, build and move forward in a direction of a circular economy and or addressing sort of, marine plastic waste. So I guess I'm wondering do you guys see examples of how, official development assistance is trying to be aligned with efforts to maybe address, again, this global challenge, which we know in many instances, the heart of this global challenge is in Southeast Asia. So again, welcome any comments or observations from either one of you.
I'm Keiji-san, I'm happy to go first, unless you'd like to.
Jump in, Stuart.
All right, thank you. I think just an initial comment is, I think we really saw from Keiji-san's presentation how Japan is a model of moving to a circular economy. But moving from developed to developing countries, we can't copy and paste. And I think when we look to the broader region and in the developing countries, there are a lot of examples of pilot or small scale projects that are doing this, whether they're in Indonesia or Vietnam, the Philippines, kind of throughout the region. We're seeing projects that are being led by the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, by individual companies, by multinational development banks, by environmental groups. The opportunity, though, is to use the treaty to really replicate at scale these smaller examples. And so where the government of Japan, I think, is a great leader in this area and is kind of showing how it can be done, it's also a more well-resourced country. Right. And so we've got to find ways to support the other ASEAN countries to help them replicate and scale. And I really, really appreciate and support Keiji-san's remarks about acknowledging the history and the local circumstances of governments. We've got to have a global agreement that's flexible, that allows governments to develop plans that are appropriate for their region, rather than trying to impose a one-size-fits-all approach. So quickly on the funding assistance, I have a little bit of knowledge on the United States. The USAID has a program, Clean Cities, Blue Ocean, which I think is a good example of providing development assistance. And there has been talk in the United States Congress, and I suspect we will see more of this, and certainly ACC supports it, more funding going toward development assistance, whether it's through USAID or some other government program, to really help nations develop the pieces of the circular economy to address the plastic waste issue.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate that. Kari-san, any final comment there before we sort of bring this particular portion of our discussion to a close?
Thank you. I don't have any additional comment, but I'm very happy to hear and to to hear your comments and kind of a warm atmosphere, and maybe we could work together for future.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. You know, I'm glad you mentioned really the idea of sort of working together, because I really think it's been interesting as we're sort of bringing 2021 to a close. And, you know, many organizations like ours at the US-ASEAN Business Council and our members have already begun to think about potential areas of collaboration and work in 2022, particularly, and again, in this broad thematic area of sustainability, which obviously issues around waste is just one, you know, very strategic and important slice. I can tell you there's definitely a lot of interest in, number one, looking at potential ways of deepening collaborations and partnerships between the United States and Japan, and particularly via the private sector. I think is an area that is poised for a lot of potential additional growth going forward, particularly in some of these topical areas. And then I can imagine, again, while, you know, the US-ASEAN Business Council is not not government, I can imagine at the G to G level, we do know that obviously the United States government and the government of Japan are engaged in a number of discussions around sort of deepening collaboration in areas that are relevant for sort of third country applications and partnerships. So again, I think this is a great initial sort of level setting conversation that really potentially, I think, opens up, hopefully will be more conversations about how, again, industry, government, United States, Japan, and other like-minded partners can be doing more internationally, and particularly in terms of Southeast Asia. So again, thank you very much for really these two presentations to kind of get this particular conversation started. I'm now going to turn to sort of our second discussion or second panel. And here, we're really going to get an opportunity to kind of dive a little bit deeper in terms of sharing best practices to bolster circular economy development. And we want to explore, again, what we see are potential some of the challenges posed by plastic pollution in ASEAN, which can be addressed by also investing in, again, the necessary infrastructure to really promote and build out this circular economy development process, again, as the 10 ASEAN economic ministers have put forward in terms of an ASEAN regional framework. We've got three speakers that are going to kind of help us, again, maybe get a better appreciation for some of the trends and ongoing efforts in the region. Let me just introduce them very quickly. So we have one, Mr. Dalsan Chong from Singapore's Natural Environment Agency. We're also going to have Regula Sheikh from Circulate Capital's Managing Director for Asia. And we're also going to have Dr. Han Zhang from he's Sustainability Director for Dow Packaging and Specialty Plastics for Asia Pacific. So we're really excited to hear sort of your three presentations. Our first speaker, again, will be Dalsan Chong, who's currently the Director for Industry Development and the Promotion Division with Singapore's National Environmental Agency, as well as the Managing Director of the Clean Enviro Summit Singapore. NEA is one of the three statutory boards of the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, is a public organization responsible for assuring a clean and sustainable environment in Singapore. And of course, for those of us who are not native to Singapore, but who've had a chance to go to Singapore, it is definitely by far one of the cleaner societies that I have had the chance to live and work in over the years. We'll definitely look forward to his presentation. Let me also, again, just in the spirit of getting the sort of the bios out of the way, our second speaker will be, again, Ms. Regula Sheikh. Regula is the Circulate Capital's Managing Director for Asia. She leads the investment strategy, manages the investment team, and oversees Circulate Capital Ocean Fund's investment portfolio in South and Southeast Asia. Together with her team, Regula manages asset allocations as well as doing due diligence, portfolio management of fund investments, as well as providing strategic advisory to portfolio companies, focuses on strategy, business development, and fundraising, and amongst other areas. And then our third speaker, Dr. Hong Zhang, is the Sustainability Director for Dow Packaging Specialty Plastics for Asia Pacific, and is responsible for developing sustainability-driven business strategies and key plastic sustainability advocacy projects in Asia that help advance a circular economy. Dr. Zhang is also responsible for delivering on Dow's 2025 sustainability goals, and I definitely want to come back to those, and developing programs that address critical sustainability issues, such as marine debris and plastic recycling. Dr. Zhang also works in building partnerships with various value chain partners and industry associations throughout the Asia Pacific region. So with that, again, let me turn the floor over to our first of three speakers, and that's going to be our good friend from the National Environment Agency from Singapore, Dawson. So the floor is yours, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for your kind words on Singapore. Welcome, everybody. I hope to welcome everybody to Singapore in 2022 after we close down the close up is 2021. First of all, I would like to thank US-ABC for inviting me to join this webinar. I also would like to take this opportunity to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Because later on, probably we may have a rush in time and we will not have been able to give this opportunity to greet everybody when we close up this 2021, a very challenging year, the 2 years, 2020 and 2021, and we look forward to a more brighter 2022. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and greetings from Singapore, and good evening to my colleagues signing in from the USA. I'm very pleased to join all of you at this webinar today. Marine plastics litter and microplastics is an international issue and needs to be collectively and urgently addressed. Internationally, Singapore actively contributes to regional and global efforts to address marine plastic litter through various engagements, including ASEAN Regional Action Plan on combating marine debris. Domestically, Singapore has put in place stringent regulations on pollution control alongside its comprehensive waste management framework to manage domestic waste and prevent it from entering the ocean. This includes an integrated solid waste management approach for 100% collection and treatment of our waste. Singapore has also launched the Singapore Green Plan 2030 early this year, 2021, which provides a whole of nation sustainability roadmap to drive alignment across all stakeholders towards a sustainable future for Singapore. A circular economic approach where waste is designed out of the system and resource loops are closed is being explored to achieve these targets. Such a circular economy approach was first mooted under the Zero Waste Master Plan, which was launched in 2019. Food waste, e-waste, and packaging waste, including plastics, which are either generated in large quantities with low recycling rate or have a detrimental effect on the environment if not properly managed, were identified as the 3 priority waste streams for Singapore to close the resource loop as we work towards the vision of a zero waste nation. Plastic waste, including plastics packaging, forms the 3rd largest waste stream in Singapore. It contributes about 15% of our total waste generation, but has a mediocre recycling rate of only 4%. The Resource Sustainability Act provides the legislative framework to impose upstream regulatory measures and requires businesses to take actions to address these waste streams. These regulatory measures will help to drive demand and create a viable industry for resource recovery in Singapore, which are important in our move towards a circular economy. The mandatory packaging reporting framework was introduced in 2021 as a first step towards making companies more aware of the environmental impact of packaging that they supply to the market and spur them to reduce packaging and packaging waste. The MPR, or the mandatory packaging reporting, will lay the foundation for an extended producer responsibility, or in short, EPR framework for packaging waste management in Singapore. The first phase of the EPR framework will include the introduction of a legislative framework for a beverage container return scheme by 2022. This scheme aims to improve the recycling rates of beverage containers by requiring beverage producers to finance the return of used beverage containers. To close the plastic waste loops, Singapore's long-term plans include improving our recycling capabilities and plastic recycling rates. NEA and Shell are jointly studying the feasibility of chemical recycling to treat plastic waste in Singapore. Besides this, NEA is conducting a consultancy study on a pilot plastic recovery facility to recover plastic waste from general waste generated from our households to be used as feedstock for chemical recycling, and we are assessing its feasibility. NEA complements its legislative measures with outreach measures to reduce plastic waste. A key outreach measure is the Say Yes to Waste Less campaign. The campaign aims at encouraging the public to lead a sustainable lifestyle by reducing the use of disposable and food wastage. Partners, including corporates, social enterprises, interest groups, non-governmental organizations, have committed to various actions to reduce the use of disposables and/or food wastage. NEA cannot achieve the circular economy alone and will need to work with other stakeholders, businesses, and civil society. As a small, open, export-oriented economy, it will be challenging for Singapore to have an influence over product design or achieve circularity alone. It is therefore important to engage countries and international organizations to promote circularity at a regional level. Specifically, we are currently pushing for industry's transformation to build up Singapore's recycling capabilities by sorting better and reducing contaminations. Recently, NEA and the US-ASEAN signed a memorandum of understanding to deepen collaboration on sustainability initiatives and address regional sustainability challenges. The MOU reinforced our shared commitment with US private sector to work together and build a more sustainable future. We welcome US companies with new and innovative solutions that are relevant to sustainable development and improve efficiency of existing green operations to explore opportunities in Singapore. Some areas that companies could look into include carbon abatement, digitalization, and chemical recycling of plastics. I therefore look forward to an engaging panel discussion that follow later. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for those comments. And I really appreciate you mentioning the MOU that the US-ASEAN Business Council has developed with the ministry. We really believe it offers a very exciting platform to really explore ways for the US business community, which, as you know, are partners and stakeholders in Singapore, to really also contribute and play a role in addressing sort of the circular economy efforts in the country. So I appreciate you mentioning that going forward. We'll circle back to some other dimensions of that as well. Let me turn to our second speaker and to give Regula an opportunity to offer some remarks. So let's give the floor to is yours now. Please go ahead.
Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. Let me go on camera as well. I hope, do you see the screen now fully?
We can, thank you.
And the presentation, wonderful, now it works, technology. Well, again, thanks for having me and happy to share some of the opportunities and challenges we see at Circular Capital, building on some of the remarks we heard from the three speakers before me. The size of the price of investing in the circular economy in Asia, we consider really threefold. If we start investing in infrastructure, in businesses within South and Southeast Asia, we actually have the opportunity to prevent 45% of the current leakage of plastic into the ocean. We can actually fight climate change. Just as an example, we can reduce 150 million tons of greenhouse gas emission if we were to be able to prevent 100% of the plastic leakage in India and Indonesia by 2030 alone. This is equivalent to shutting down 40 coal-fired power plants. And what we can also do in investing in the circular economy in South and Southeast Asia, we can create significant jobs and tremendous economic value. Research shows that that could be more than 300 billion over the next years to come. But the multi-billion-dollar question we address is really, where does the money come from to invest into the circular economy at scale? Well, today we see opportunities, businesses which are addressing issues within the circular economy. We're far away from what we need to do to bring it to scale. So when we look at where the different companies are in Southeast Asia, from a startup all the way to businesses which are in the scale, we see there's tremendous opportunity, but there's also tremendous capital needed. Where we see the biggest need is really where we scale businesses. And that's where we need more than $2 billion to actually invest to get the businesses which are early stage today to the level where they can actually address the global challenges. We do see also that there is some money, a couple of millions available in the startup seeds. But where is the big gap? The big gap is really between growth and acquisition. So between growth stage companies, expansion, and then acquisition stage. And that's where we are coming in as Circular Capital, as an investment management firm based in Singapore. In 2019, we launched our first fund it's called the Ocean Fund. It is a corporate fund, and as you see, we raised more than $100 million to really bridge that gap, that catalytic capital gap, to get the companies from early stage seed all the way to expansion and scale. And some of our investors are Dow, which we have here as well, Unilever, Chanel, Danone, Pepsi, Chevron Phillips, Mondelez, Procter & Gamble, and Coca-Cola. But because this is such a uncharted territory, or a space which there has not been institutional capital in the past, we also have a blended finance mechanism in collaboration with the US International Development Finance Corporation, in collaboration with USAID. So basically, part of our portfolio we invest, the loan portfolio is guaranteed by DFC, the United States. Mm-hmm. So this blended finance mechanism allows us to bring capital into the market, to build a pipeline, to show evidence-based track record, mainly saying that it is an investable space where you can make money, but you also can have a tremendous social and environmental impact. And by showcasing that, and by being such a catalyst, we can actually now attract institutional capital. And where we started in 2019, where we started with this Ocean Fund funded by corporates, we're now just most recently launched a new product, which is called Circular Capital Disrupt. It's a $50 million product. And what is different? The investors are family offices, and the investors are private investors, institutional investors, DFIs. So we actually can showcase now, by going early in and building an investment opportunity, a pipeline, now an institutional capital is following us. What we see are 4 critical gaps to address the circular economy in South and Southeast Asia, particularly in the area of preventing ocean plastic leakage. One key gap is disruptive innovation. Now we have innovation, which is deep tech, which will need years before it is ready for scale, but is absolutely key to tackle the issue as well. And then we have other innovations which are ready to go to market, which we invest in. And what is that? You know, there is material out there, often from agri-waste, which can be used for packaging, and therefore can replace plastics where it makes sense. We look into new distribution models, new refill models, but we also look into deep tech, which is really material in development, which could really transform the industry. Another key gap is really increased collection and sorting. As you may know, the majority of the waste in Southeast Asia and South Asia is not collected. It is dropped into the waterways. It is burned, which generates tremendous greenhouse gas emission. It is just not or it is filled, it's going to landfills, which are not sanitary. So the overall collection and sorting issue of waste in Asia is a big issue. And so we really see tremendous need to put this capital into these infrastructure development projects, which we focus on as well. And also remember that 80%, or actually 95% of Asia's waste picked and brought back into the circular economy is actually picked by the informal sector. So we also need to make sure when talking about not just investing, but also having a social return, that we bring this informal sector into the game and enable them as part of a key contributor and a key partner in solving the issue of plastic leakage into the ocean. The other key area or gap is really using that material for upcycling. Today, it's not rocket science to actually take a PET bottle, recycle it, and put it back into another PET bottle. There is technology out there to recycle PE. We're looking into low density sachet solutions. So it's not that the opportunities or the technology is not out there. It's not always easy, but it can be done. It's about the capital needed to go into that industry, which has been chronically underserved with traditional funding. And the last but not least is digitization. We have an enormous data gap in this industry. And for investors to understand and to make the best decision to invest, they need baseline data to analyze deals, and from that level also track impact. When we talk about ESG, it should be very clear that we can showcase that the actions we take have actually a positive impact. So a case study, just to give you a sense what that means in our context and where we put our money in. For example, we just a couple of weeks ago and announced this week, invested in a company in Indonesia, which is really focusing in collaboration with city governments in collecting the material and valorize the material, bring it back so that it is that we're moving ultimately towards a zero waste society. This company has ultimately maybe maximum 2% of all the consumer or the household and commercial waste collected going to landfill. Everything else is brought back into the circular economy and recycled and reused. Another investment is in India, which is in India, the first food grade facility we funded to actually produce PET and polyolefin flakes and granules for recycling purposes so that the material goes back into new packaging. This in a nutshell what we do. Hope that was informative and look forward to some of your questions.
Great, thank you so much for that presentation. I can tell you we at the US-ASEAN Business Council oftentimes value opportunities where we can sort of connect quote unquote the multinational corporation perspective to also points of view from investors who are maybe more plugged into sort of the startup ecosystems. Because we all know in Southeast Asia, startup ecosystems are providing tremendous locales for really innovation taking place in the region and globally significant types of innovation. And of course, very, as we see from a little startup once known as Grab Taxi, going public on the New York Stock Exchange, now valued at what, a $40 billion company. Again, that's a perfect example of, again, of the kind of innovation going on in Southeast Asia. I'm sure we'll circle back to some key, again, intersection points there. Let me now turn to, again, our final speaker for this second and last panel. Dr. Zhang, we want to give you the floor, and then upon the completion of your presentation, we will have a little bit more time for some Q&A. So thank you. Zhang, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mark. Since we don't have much of time left, I'll try to be concise and hopefully we'll have a time for discussion. So Dylan, if you can bring on my slides.
There we go, okay.
All right, great. If you just move to the second one. So Dow, as one of the largest material science company, we take sustainability very seriously. We have a very long history of doing 10 years as a SustainGo. We started our journey back in 1995. At that time, we were primarily focused within our fines line. For example, improve energy efficiency, reduce health and safety incidents, So during that time, the company invested $1 billion, and we got almost like $5 billion in return. This really shows that to the senior management team, there is a value in sustainability. And this gave the company the confidence to do a second generation sustainability goal. We call it a 100% goal, which means we want to focus more on the product side, how our product can help the society, can help our customer, can help consumer to become more sustainable. So during that 10 years, we grow those, we call the highly sustainable products, grow the market share for those products from $900 million to I think $12 billion at the end of the 10 years ago. So one thing we learned from that 20 years of the sustainability journey is the issue we're facing are so challenging. We cannot solve the problem alone. We really need to partner with other people, other stakeholders like government, academia, private company, even like NGOs. So the third generation of our sustainability goal, we call the blueprint goal. We want to work with other stakeholders to develop a blueprint for a sustainable society. And also our sustainability journey is it's an evolving journey. We keep discovering new things. For example, over the past several years, we all realize plastic waste issue, marine debris issue, as well as climate change, the carbon issue. So if you move to the next slide. So in 2020, we launched we launched two sides of a new target. So one is focusing on circular economy, and there are two targets. One is stop the waste. By 2030, we want to stop the waste by enabling 1 million metric tons of plastic to be collected, reused, or recycled through either our direct action or partnership. Basically, we want to keep plastic out of the environment. Plastic is great material, but it doesn't belong to the environment. Another target is we really want to close the loop. Yeah, we keep plastic out of the environment, but how can we extract the value from those plastic waste? That's very important. And another important part is we want to enable 100% of our products sold into packaging application to be reusable or recyclable. If you think about it, why the plastic recycling rate is low, is maybe only 9%, because many of those packaging or other applications, they cannot be recycled with today's technology. However, as a material science company, we have a solution. We can convert those packaging into 100% recyclable. Another thing is we realize the carbon issue and the circular economy issue are merging together more and more. We cannot treat them separately. That's why we have another target. We want to protect the climate. So on one side, by 2030, we want to reduce our absolute emission by 5 million metric tons. This is 15% reduction compared to our 2020 baseline. And we have even more aggressive goal by 2050. As a company, we want to become carbon neutral. I believe we're the first company to announce this among all the petrochemical companies. This is a very aggressive goal. So in the next couple of slides, I just want to give you a snapshot on our plan and how we can achieve those aggressive targets. So if you move to the next slide. So on circular economy, to close the loop and stop the waste, basically there are three pillars. One, we want to keep the plastic out of the environment. We want to work with a local community and to build the infrastructure. I think many of the speakers before me, they talk about the importance of investment and infrastructure. One of the reasons why we have a why we have a marine debris issue and a plastic waste issue is a lack of infrastructure. Even consumers, they want to recycle plastic. They have no channel to recycle the plastic. There's no collection, processing, those kind of a channel. So we have to build a lot of things from scratch. And we want to work with a local community to build the circular economy program. For example, in Thailand, we have a community in Rayong province, and we completely converted that community to zero waste. And not only zero waste, but also create more jobs and also generate economic value for the community. We're also exploring new ways to use plastic waste. Mechanical recycling, we all know that's one solution. Later, I will talk about our exercise in this space. but we're exploring new solutions. For example, use plastic waste to build a road. We first piloted the idea in Indonesia, and then we expanded it to India, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and China. And now we even export this idea back to US and Europe, because this is the idea developed in Asia. And now the US and Europe, they're adopting those new ideas. By using plastic waste to build the road, not only we can divert the waste, but also we can make the road stronger. The other part is leverage our design for recyclability platform. As I said, a lot of the packaging structure right now cannot be recycled, but now we have a solution to convert them to fully recyclable by replacing different material in the packaging structure. So this is just one success. We work with Levi, one of the major brand owner in China, converted their laundry detergent pouch into fully recyclable. The second pillar is really amplify the impact through partnership. I think a regular mention talk about the circular capital. We're very proud to be one of the founding investor. We are also a founding member of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. Stu just mentioned about that. I think right now more than 60 companies joined the Alliance, and together we committed over $1.5 billion to solve this plastic waste issue. The third pillar is really deliver circular economy solution. For example, advanced recycling. We are investing heavily in developing advanced recycling technology, expand the capacity. Hopefully next year we can bring circular polymer to Asia. On the other side, we are diversifying our feedstock. For example, use a bio-based material, so that in the future we can make polyethylene from renewable sources. Actually, we are already doing that. We commercialize the first bio-based polyethylene with a Malaysia company called Tongguan. So they make a shrink film using our bio-based film. So it has a very low carbon footprint. And another activity is to integrate the recycled material into a product. So basically we bring them back into the loop. So we commercialize post-consumer recycled plastic in all sub-regions in Asia Pacific, including several countries in Southeast Asia. So if you go to the next one, I don't want to go to the detail about our carbon neutrality plan. You can see this is very comprehensive. We'll cover the technology part, renewable energy mix. Dow actually is one of the largest renewable energy user among all the companies. If you think about Google or Facebook, we are among that peer group. We use a lot of renewable energy. We are also actively investing into carbon capture, carbon storage. Just one thing I want to highlight, I don't know if you noticed a recent announcement. We're going to expand polyethylene plant in Canada, in Chinook. This will be the world's first net zero large-scale petrochemical plant. So in the near future, we can produce either zero or low carbon polyethylene products. So plastic can provide a lot of benefit. Now we can make it circular and even make it zero carbon. So that's what we call a polymer with a purpose. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to close by saying low carbon circular. There are a lot of low carbon circular economy solutions enabled by Dow. We are well positioned to enable those solutions. And to us, a circular economy is really keep every molecule at the highest value throughout its life cycle as long as possible, no matter if it's a hydrocarbon molecule or if this is just a carbon molecule. So if we can achieve this vision, then we can achieve a low carbon society as well as a circular economy society. So with that, Mark, get it back to you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Dr. Zhang. Appreciate that. It's so timely, for example, that you not only mentioned obviously the efforts that Dow is making in this space, but I appreciate even the snapshot you gave us of sort of the bigger picture around around carbon, for example. Just literally 24 hours ago, we were very honored to do a webinar last night with the government of Indonesia focused on carbon capture and opportunities. And just in that one space alone, tremendous opportunities that I think the government of Indonesia, as well as other key industry leaders see for Indonesia in that space. And just to bring it back full circle, I can imagine with Indonesia hosting G20 next year, that may be one particular area that they really try to leverage hosting G20 to really highlight that they really envision Indonesia can really make some tangible advances and have a game plan for what I'd like to see in that space. So thank you for just linking that little dot from yesterday to today. I appreciate it. We do have some time for some discussion, so let me just try to jump into a few questions for each of our panels before we wrap up. Let me turn back to Dawson, because one of the things that we at the US-ABC, when we're talking to governments in all parts of Southeast Asia, we oftentimes get into discussions around different parts of government bureaucracies that may be operating in silos and not necessarily collaborating across bureaucracies. So we were just curious if you might just share just very briefly some of the points that you might offer as maybe lessons learned or good practices for how different parts of the government of Singapore have kind of come together, really develop that kind of whole of government zero waste master plan. In other words, how maybe have silos been broken that maybe so could easily be formulated when you got different branches of a bureaucracy, but really coming together. If you might have some thoughts there.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for the questions. I think the Singapore has been working as a whole of government approach for many years now, and in the first few years, we are also like other administrations, we are also working in silos. But when we come together and we realize that the issues are multi-dimensional and very complex, and one ministries or one departments within the organization will not be able to resolve this. Take, for example, the plastic waste or waste management. While we are attending to the waste management, making sure that the waste is collected every day, but we also increasingly realize that the waste is becoming a resource. So that is also an opportunity for economic development, creating good jobs. So I think that the one of the key lessons that we learn is we put ourselves in the economic agency's point of view. We just have to put forward the argument to the economic agencies and to give them a value proposition that will sing with them, and they would be able to support our what I call this objective. The other big issue is sustainability. A lot of businesses are thinking that sustainability equals to cost, right? Incurring the cost at the very beginning. So we always have this life cycle analysis where actually if you think long term, although you have a short-term investment of capital outlay, but the long-term benefits to the environment, to the resource conservations, to create good jobs, to sort of create resources from the waste that will help to arrest the depletions of the natural resources. So these are all opportunities, especially for Singapore. If we can turn the waste to resources intelligently and efficiently and effectively, and that will become one of the economy pillars for us, because Singapore is really lack of natural resources. We do not have natural resources. So if you can turn the waste into available resources and export it out for the regional countries to further process this resource, so that will also create economic opportunity. So I mean, we can talk the whole day of this, but I think we need to bring ourselves to embrace the other ministries, the other agencies concerned, and to argue along those lines. And once everybody agree and they can also fulfill their mandate, their objective, I think that the whole government approach would be feasible, would be viable. Over.
No, thank you for that, because you hit really 2 points. One, make the discussion in relation in terms of value propositions that we know trade ministries or economic ministries, what they care about, That's how you get their buy-in. And number two, as you indicated, this notion of, for the one principle of life cycle costs, right? To address industry, I can tell you, members of the US-ASEAN Business Council oftentimes talk to governments in Southeast Asia about the value of calculating opportunities for projects and investments with a life cycle cost dimension. So clearly that's a synergy of value, a synergy in principle between government and business that, to me, represents a real opportunity to really work more together between public and private sector. So thank you for those points. Raghuda, let me turn to you, because you put on the table, I think, two really fundamental points around investing in solutions and in companies that have solutions in ASEAN can really have, quote unquote, the biggest global impact on this issue around marine plastics, right? So at a macro level, you've kind of really put on the table, any investor who wants to make the biggest impact on this global issue, the place to look to maybe deploy capital is really in Southeast Asia relative to any other part of the world. So I'm just curious, from your vantage point, where are you seeing, quote unquote, maybe capital coming from other parts of the world or within the region being deployed in Southeast Asia in this kind of space? Is it more so from Europe? Obviously, you guys are partnering with Dow and maybe other Americans, so that's one example. But I'm just curious, where are you sort of seeing, I guess, if you could compare maybe the levels of interest to really look at this region as, again, an investment opportunity in this space?
Yeah, initially, I mean, the money clearly came, in this pioneering relationship from the large multinational corporations I showed in the slide. And that was really the catalytic capital we needed. Now, 3 years down the road, we see DFIs coming in.
Okay.
So that's very important, right? We see generally more and more appetite from institutionals, not just from Europe or the United States, but also from Asia. We see family offices from Asia coming in. So I think generally by showcasing that it is an investable space, and we've done that throughout the last 3 years, now regional capital is definitely coming into and came into our second fund. So I think it becomes very global. I mean, we also see large, like BlackRock moving towards ESG, but I think we need to really clearly understand what is actually what we're tracking and how do we define impact in general to really make sure that what we do it right. But generally, globally, I think the capital is ready to move into circular economy, and not just in Southeast Asia. LATAM is the next region to go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I think you hit a very good point. Actually, one of our, here in Washington, in fact, one of the ASEAN ambassadors has started a conversation with their counterparts here in America around this notion of, we're seeing a lot of capital in our country and also in the region going outside of ASEAN. And what can we do maybe to keep more of that ASEAN capital that's flowing out, again, pursuing opportunities, to maybe also see opportunities within the region? And clearly, as you noted, if the global capital community sees opportunities in Southeast Asia, that can also, I think, be a good catalyst maybe to address the ambassador's question of how come more ASEAN money isn't staying here at home, for these types of projects? Well, if global money is coming in, maybe that does tweak the interest a bit more of family offices and other sources of local capital, because we all know in Southeast Asia, broadly speaking, it's oftentimes not a question of capital. we know there is capital in Southeast Asia. Oftentimes a question of, again, projects, deals, opportunities, how they're packaged, et cetera, becomes a really more of a challenge. So thank you for that. So let me turn back to you, Jen. You made some really good comments, again, from Dow and the multinational perspective. What do you see, again, from maybe some of the opportunities/challenges that a multinational company that kind of has this vision, has this game plan, and really kind of wants to move forward in some of these areas, but maybe in certain markets, faces policy, legal, or regulatory challenges to try to do more in this space? maybe you could offer some observations of maybe, again, what you guys are seeing.
I think one important part we really appreciate if a policymaker can make their policy based on science, not on emotion. I think several of you mentioned about life cycle assessment, life cycle costing. So because a lot of a policy, there will be unintended consequences. So we really wish the policymaker they can think through those policy and make it the best decision, and also we wish them they could have like an open dialogue with the industry. A lot of the time we want to help, we have a solution, but we need to have a channel to discuss with the decision maker, policy maker, and let them know. For example, advanced recycling. This is a new technology. It may not be under the radar of those policymakers, but we need to figure out a way, a roadmap, how we can grow, because you need the investment, you need the technology development, and you need time to develop those technology at the scale. So we really need to collaborate with policymaker on many of those issues.
No, those are very good points, and I certainly reckon that we oftentimes find ourselves again trying to position U.S. industry, again, as you said, lots of resource as being a source of solutions, a source of ideas, particularly in terms of some innovative technologies that maybe a given government official or bureaucracy may not even be really fully aware that there are potential solutions that are out there, in fact. And on the flip side, we oftentimes have to remind our companies that we work with, oftentimes we hear from regulators that one of the things that they're really keen to get more from industry is sort of those tangible examples of, real world different impacts, from a change in regulation that enables a new technology to be deployed, and then what's the real world impact? Because sometimes we find that our friends on the regulatory side are saying, Mark, we hear you guys saying, we should do A, B, and C, but if you really want to influence us, give us the tangible examples of the impacts of the results, that if we do A, B, and C, these are the kinds of things we can expect to see as a result. So I think, as always, we at the US-ABC, we find ourselves in the middle between policymakers, regulators, and industry. We're trying to facilitate those respective value propositions to both sides. Being conscious of time, I want to give each one of you, and really all of our speakers, sort of maybe a parting shot, so to speak, maybe to close out this discussion. But I wanted to put something on the table, and you can feel free to jump into it if you'd like to in your parting shot. And that is, as we've noted already, 2022 is rapidly approaching. ASEAN member states like Indonesia in terms of chairing G20, like Thailand in terms of chairing APEC, even Cambodia playing the role as ASEAN chair. They're going to be hosting, summits, big events, forums, et cetera, And I'd welcome, and we'd all welcome, maybe if you'd like to maybe offer some thoughts or ideas on how in some of these maybe ministerial events or summits, how some of these types of issues that you guys are really focused on maybe should be positioned or teed up in ways that maybe can lend and add value to all of us trying to move forward on this broader question of circular economy and maybe addressing plastic, because we see them as opportunities, of course. We know agendas can be very full with lots of priorities, but if you had your druther, so to speak, where would you like to see maybe how some of these issues could be framed in some of these upcoming summits in 2022? And Nelson, I can start with you, but I also want to go to also our speakers from our first panel as well.
Thank you, Mark, for giving me this opportunity. Just want to write on the point about the industries in Singapore. Actually, we do encourage industry to try out the new technologies in the Singapore context, because that is a real world that we want to test out all this technology. Again, we also have a similar concern by the regulators whether this technology will work or doesn't work. So I think we have in Singapore introduced what we call the regulatory sandbox, where the projects can be implemented safely within some boundary conditions. That will be an opportunity for the technology company to test out the new technology, to showcase to the regulators the technology will work. As to the economic benefits, I think that it is a chicken and egg. If you do not have this technology implemented to be seen that they are actually, in terms of environmental protections, they will be safeguarded, we will be very difficult to quantify or to monetize the benefit this new technology will bring to. So the other way I can offer, besides all those summits, is the Green Enviro Summit Singapore, which I organize. I think that will be another platform for the industries and the government regulators to come together to share the best practices as well as the technologies, and they will have a very enlightened mind to actually test out all these new technology in their own countries, and Singapore will be prepared to assist them in trying out these technologies over.
No, we do recognize that, and I think Singapore has done a great job of offering itself, as you said, sort of that sandbox opportunity, the chance to really try things out in real time and real world. And then, as we all know, Singapore is also oftentimes very willing to be for those things that it chooses to be very successful, tries to be also be a good partner in maybe scaling things up, pushing them out maybe within the region. And I think, again, there's so many examples I think Singapore can be very proud of to showcase sort of that approach. Regula, what would you say again as a parting shot, or again, maybe again, how can we really elevate these kinds of conversations, maybe in the context of some of these big ministerial summit events coming to Southeast Asia next year?
I think for me, there are 3 points. The first is that we acknowledge that solid waste management and plastic recycling is considered system critical, so that in future pandemics, it's not going to happen, but that in such difficult times, they're not shut down, which we have seen during COVID. Second is we just need investment-friendly environment and policies, particularly also when we talk about the application of plastic in food-grade applications, because that's really full circular. In many countries, it's not yet permitted. That would enable additional, recycling. And then third is generally, I think, for the industry and SMEs, that we have really, enabling policies for those businesses to start and grow.
Fantastic. Thank you for those excellent points. And I think you, again, to really highlight that little link between vis-a-vis COVID and critical systems that need to be able to be maintained is, we all know many governments are going through processes of hopefully lesson learning. That clearly has to be one lesson that governments will be thinking about to really be more resilient in the future if we have to obviously face similar types of pandemics and shocks to the system. Dr. Zhang, a closing comment again, or highlight an area you'd love to see maybe featured in some of these summits?
I think one thing is definitely we should keep this conversation going. This is not just like a one time. I really appreciate US-APC's support. So we need more of this kind of a venue to share data from both sides, the policy side, the private company side, and also capital side. And for those summits, I really hope that those summits can bring clarity on the future policy. Because as a company, if we want to invest, we need to have a clear vision of the country about the policy framework, no matter if it's a global plastic treaty or some specific policy like extended producer's responsibility. So hopefully we can bring more clarity into this space. And also I hope through the dialogue, the conversation, we can build a more partnership through those summits, no matter if it's a private company or private public-private partnership. We need those kind of a collaboration to bring solution at a scale and get necessary capital.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So ladies and gentlemen, first of all, really on behalf of all of my colleagues, we really, really appreciate the presentations and the time that all of our speakers have shared with us tonight. Very informative. I can tell you that I know, the US-ABC, which has been around for decades, I can tell you that broadly speaking, this space is really, I would say, one of the fastest growing areas of the US-ASEAN Business Council in terms of the priorities of our members. And as we begin to try to do more in the broader questions around sustainability, circular economy, waste management, we're going to be looking again to continue to develop new partnerships, because we know there are other entities, other organizations that maybe have been in this space long before we have. We're probably in some ways kind of a newcomer to this space, and we welcome that because we think we can also bring some value to maybe partnerships and collaborations going forward. So we're very excited there. And we also recognize, again, we get a chance to work with organizations that are already doing a lot in this space already and are looking for opportunities, again, where they can further scale up, complement, supplement existing initiatives. And again, that's where, again, we hope that the US-ASEAN Business Council, again, can add value vis-a-vis the brand that we sort of bring to some of these conversations. So we're really excited to look forward. Again, for those we don't know, our sustainability committee really kind of serves as the hive within our organization for where, again, we're coming together with member companies across a wide range of industry sectors, all really kind of focused on many of these topics under the broader heading of sustainability going forward. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we really, again, want to thank you all for your time. Please keep an eye out for future programs and activities that we're going to be doing in this space. Starting next year, we're really going to be ramping up our fireside chat series with chief sustainability officers from some of the leading global companies across a whole range of different industry sectors to really kind of highlight, again, some of the efforts that these organizations are really spearheading and more importantly, where they're investing resources in. Because we think at the end of the day, oftentimes these are questions of resources. And again, we also recognize there are great opportunities. So with that, for our friends in Asia, have a great rest of your day. For those who joined from the United States, have a good rest of your evening. And again, thank you again for your time and your attention today. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very
Bye-bye.
much. A lovely evening for today.